Ladies, welcome to the No Higher Calling podcast. I am so excited to introduce you to a dear friend who it's been a long time since we've caught up. But it's so exciting to have Jamie Mock on the podcast with me. Jamie, thanks so much for joining.
Thank you for having me.
I'm trying to think, have we seen each other since my student teaching years?
I think we have
Our
on and
lives
off.
kind of just
Yes,
diverged and we have just
we
been
did.
rolling forward. But yeah, so let's rewind the clock a while. My last year of Bible college, I was studying at Crown, getting my English degree, and I was student teaching. And I got to work with you, which was honestly probably one of the highlights of my entire college career. That was the best semester. I loved that. And funny enough, I haven't done any school teaching since. That was my kind of one and only. We'll see what God has for the future, but I'm homeschool mom now, which I love, and I'm
Yes.
implementing all of that into this season. But that was such a unique season of my life, and I loved it. And I think you made it so fun. I remember you gave me freedom to just do a deep study into Greek mythology with some of the literary classes, and that was so fun. So anyway, we go way back, but I'm really excited to have you on the podcast. Why don't you share a little bit about yourself and your family?
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. Yes, I'm Jamie Mock, and I have been married to Michael for almost 22 years, which is kind of crazy. I have a 19-year-old son, Griffin. He is a sophomore at UT here in town. I live in Knoxville. My daughters are 17 and 15, and they'll be a senior in high school and a junior in high school. And so, yes, a lot of my years were spent teaching in a school setting, in a private
Mhm.
Christian school in Temple. And so I spent, uh, I think it was 16 years teaching high school there, and had lots of student teachers that came through. You'll have to remind me what year you graduated.
2014.
Okay. All right. So that was, yeah, I had been there for probably about
I
14
think that was
years.
at the tail end, yeah, of your teaching there,
Yeah.
so
Yeah. So teaching there was such a joy, and I still get together with a lot of those students, and it's so fun to see where life has taken them. And I
Mhm.
do. And then through different circumstances in life, God called us home to homeschool. And I've been doing that now we're going into our 11th year of homeschool. And so
Wow.
when I started, my kids were first grade, second grade, and fourth grade. And so that was way out of my wheelhouse because high school is my jam. And so when I started in the elementary years, it's just something that I knew. We really just did it for a year, just for a
Mhm.
transition. And I thought, well, we'll just homeschool them and just see where God takes us. And then they fell in love with it, and I fell in love with it, and we just never stopped. So here we are, 11 years later, and I'll have my second senior, and then my youngest will be right behind her.
That is so neat, and that's really what I'm here to have you talk about is homeschooling teenagers, because 'cause I'm in the season of homeschooling. I've got one in kindergarten, I've got one in 3rd grade, and one in 5th grade. So I'm still homeschooling in the elementary years, and I know sometimes when I talk to other moms that are in my season, they kind of look forward to the future and think, "Man, this could be really great. This could be really terrifying," and culture and so much bombards us with all these messages about
Sure.
teenagers, um and I just don't think that has to be the narrative.
Mhm.
Every season brings its challenges, um, but I think that there's beauty to be had in all of the seasons as well. So I have just a list of questions I'm going to run through with you, just asking you about your experience homeschooling your teens. The first one is, what has been the most rewarding part about homeschooling teenagers?
I think probably I would have to say watching them grow into their adult selves. I think, when they're little, you can see little glimpses of who they might become and what God's gifted them with, and their strengths and their weaknesses, and wondering how that will all play out. And so then as they enter the high school years, really middle school, yes, you can kind of see it forming, but really the high school years, you're seeing those come to fruition, and you're seeing what they've all, it might be the thing that you've butt heads over for the past 10 years, and you're seeing now how God's going to use that, and how that's going to be something as they step into their adult selves. There's a shift, and you do have to be ready for it, because there's a shift in there of allowing them become an adult or a young adult, allowing them into that, make those mistakes, and I think we'll talk later about how our responsibility and role in that will shift. But just the most rewarding part has been as we've poured into the reading lessons and the math facts and just the memory verses and, and the little things that we go over all throughout the elementary years, those turn into deep conversations and questions and some struggles even as they figure out what they believe for themselves and why they believe
Yeah.
it and all things. And I just think that's been a super rewarding part of it.
Yeah, that's awesome. My oldest is actually going to be 10 this year. That's hard for me to believe.
It's
Um,
crazy.
but it has been a really unique aspect. We aren't all the way there yet. But just to see more of her person develop and to start having some of those conversations, that has been so neat. And I love the baby season. Like that is my all-time favorite. And I used to think, oh, if I could just go back. But the older she gets, the more I think, you know what? I don't know that I'd trade what I have now for those days. Because already I'm loving the little glimpses of who she is. And I feel like we're transitioning into a phase where her mind is more active. She has more of an opinion. And sometimes that's a little bit, whoa. Um, but it's neat to see like her independence in her thinking. And so that's really neat. So I'm just excited. I'm excited about
Yeah, you're
all, I'm trying to remember. I think maybe that's what first triggered me to reach out to you. I think maybe I had shared something about reading to my kids, and I think you messaged me and said it just keeps getting better and you get to have these great conversations. And I was like, "Oh, I cannot wait for that day."
yes, it's amazing. And you really get to see them start to take ownership of all that you've poured into
Mm,
them and really
yeah,
take ownership of the type of work they want to put forth and the type of person they want to be. It's just a neat transition.
neat. Well, the next question is, what do you believe lays the foundation for a strong relationship with your teenagers?
Yeah, I think there's several things, and I think it'll vary a little bit. But for us, it was, well, I think one thing is universal, it's just time spent. So, um, as you spend time with your teens and even your children, homeschooling just provides such a unique opportunity to spend hours a day with your kids that you would be missing, and not missing because you don't want to spend it with them, but just missing because they wouldn't be home.
Yeah.
And so it's just the time you spend with them and then communication. So I think it's just those two things together are super important because I think there's going to come a time when communication gets a little harder. And especially there are some personalities in teens that where they aren't as open as sharing their feelings. And, you'll have some that'll share them all day long at the, even, I don't know if you're there yet, but we're at the point where it might come at midnight, and we're exhausted. They're like, I really want to have these life conversations. And I'm like, now? Really? Okay. And so you just really laying that foundation early too is just
Yeah.
allowing them to know that no questions are off the table. We made a really hard line in our home a long time ago when they were really little that any question they had, we're going
Mm.
to answer it. Truthfully, we're going to answer it to the best of our ability. And I think they know that still to this day. And some of them have taken more advantage of that than others. But I think just really knowing that if we're having a hard day, let's talk about it. And if we just had an argument, let's talk about it. And if you and I aren't getting along, let's talk about it.
Mhm.
Or you just had an amazing day, let's talk about it. Just communication, making sure they know that door is open as far as allowing them to communicate the hard, but also the fun. And
Mhm.
um, also realizing that even though, some things that are a big deal to them might not seem a big deal to you. And in our knowledge of, I've lived 47 years and they've only lived 15, 17 of those. And so even though I know that that may not play out the way they're hoping, we can still join in that conversation and meet them where they are and let them talk that out. And so, yeah, just time spent and then just open communication, I think are two of the things that have really worked to build a strong relationship. And actually, I did ask my son this question. I said, what would you say helped us build a strong relationship? And he actually said that finding the balance to allow them to learn how to be independent. And so that was interesting to me. I wouldn't have thought of that. He said maybe you could say it is in less teacher and more mom. And so that was interesting to me as well, that he thought that
Mhm.
way of, you know, your teacher role does change a little bit, but I liked hearing him say more mom because he didn't want me to stop being mom. He just didn't
Yeah.
necessarily need me as the teacher anymore. And, um, and I think when they were little, my inclination, I don't know how it got to be this way, but when they were little, maybe I had three and under, so maybe it was from that season, but you would understand that.
Yes, I
But
understand.
sometimes my immediate reaction is, no, we're not going to do that, or no, you can't do that, or no, you can't have that. And so somewhere, um, I just realized that I'd rather be a yes mom, and so I changed that script to just say yes whenever I can. Obviously, there are sometimes I have to say no still to this day, but
Yeah.
if it can be a yes, to make that a yes. And
Mhm.
so that would anyway, yeah.
Yeah. That's great, and that kinda leads into the next question, which you've already touched on a little bit. If you have anything else to add, how has your approach to teaching from in the teen years changed from those early years?
Sure. So obviously it changes a lot in how you spend your days. In the younger years, I remember feeling like I was a helicopter going from math book to math book, helping them each
I
in
always
their
say I'm
math
like a circus
stages.
clown, juggling all the balls.
Yes. Yes, exactly. And so I was going from station to station, helping
Yes.
them. Some things we did all together, but the things that they did on their
Yeah.
own, I was going. So it's less about, that repetition, less about that
Mhm.
structure, but also um, it changed because I didn't have to guide every step of the way. I was able to kind of release some of those things. Those things are hard sometimes too to release those because sometimes I can be a micromanager and I like to manage
Mhm.
and make sure that it's done right and correctly. And so in the teen years, I think I shifted to um, really starting just to give that initial instruction and then allowing them to take some ownership with still some check-ins and some
Mhm.
hands-on, but allowing them to start um, stepping away and doing that. And as long as they kept, doing it well, then I would, keep my distance. And then if I needed to step in and readjust, then I was still there to do that too. But I think it's stepping back slowly, but I think
Mhm.
that's not necessarily a sad thing because when we think about growing adults, we want our adult kids to be independent and we
Yeah.
want them to be strong individuals who are able to function in society, right? So I
Yes.
think us being able to release slowly is one of the hardest parts of being a homeschool mom and also one of the most rewarding.
Great. Well, I think one of the beautiful things about homeschooling is it can just be so tailored to exactly what you need. So what does it look like to lean into your teens' interests in those high school years? Because you hope that you may be still touching on math and English and different things, but you hope you've laid a good foundation. They know the
Sure.
mechanics and that you have a little more freedom then to invest in some of their unique individualized interests. So did that kind of play out that way for your kids?
It did, for Griffin, it was music. And so, I had them in piano when they were, from Angie Tomlinson when they were tiny,
Mhm.
tiny. And so I had Griffin took piano, I think, through the third grade, and he enjoyed it, but it was never like a love or a passion. And so, probably around fifth or sixth grade, we started some guitar lessons, and he took off from there and he just loved it. And so, he's actually part of the worship team at our church. And so, when he has some amazing mentors, men who have just poured into his life through those worship teams. And I just can't imagine that he would have done that had we not had the time for him to pour into that. And so
Yeah.
he would hours a day he would be strumming on his guitar in his room and just like we would hear this music and the grandparents would come over and they're like, is this do you hear this all the time? And we're like, yes, all hours a day, and so just to watch that passion, but to allow him the margin to grow that passion. And it even grew into I mean, he still to this day is just such a big part of that at our church, and it's just something he
Mhm.
loves. And so that's been really fun to watch that grow. And I think homeschooling was a big part of that to allow him to have that margin to do that. The girls, Mackenzie is really into horses, and so that's allowed her to have the margin to care for her horse, but also she cares for another man's horse as well. And so she's able to, I mean, the responsibility that that's instilled in
Mhm.
her has just been amazing. And then Kaylin, she actually is the first of ours to have, she actually just got a little job in the service industry here, and so she's the first of ours to have a little part-time job, but she probably since age 12 has been waiting until she could get old enough to get a little job. And so it's just been fun to watch that come to fruition in her.
Yeah.
And she went and got it, and she interviewed and got the job, and now she just works a few hours a week at a little fast food restaurant near her house, and
Mhm.
she loves it. And she also plays
Yeah.
softball, and that's an outlet for her as well. But it's just been fun to watch them grow into the people that they're going to be, and watch them grow into those
Mhm.
passions and be able to follow each of those. And then as far as education wise, we the um, electives, that's one word I'm trying to think of. The electives are so fun. So here in Tennessee, we have to graduate with a financial class. So we did that all together. Once Kaylin had,
Mhm.
I had all three in high school for 1 year. So I had a ninth grader, a 10th grader, and a 12th grader. So we did this financial class all together. And that was so fun to just walk through that. And it went through scenarios of, now you have this, which job are you going to choose? And which type of house are you going to choose? And it walked through all that. That was so fun. So instead of just, focusing on the math and the history and the
Yeah.
science, you're able to focus on those electives. And my kids didn't necessarily have I wouldn't say like a career choice chosen early on, but if you do, that's such a great opportunity to take
Mhm.
a car maintenance class, or to take a cosmetology class, or to take, I mean, you have such freedom there to
Yeah.
include those things that your kids are showing interest in.
Yeah. We use the word margin, and I really like that because I feel like it does give you that. It gives you that extra time. I know Simeon and I were both homeschooled during high school, and that allowed him to actually work a construction job, making probably 3 or 4 times what other 15-year-old guys were making. But he was only able to
Absolutely.
do that because he could work early and then do school later. I was able to finish high school in 3 years and get a jump start on college. So it's just really provides unique opportunities. And,
It
so I
does.
think that is so great. You had talked a little bit about that independence, kind of that transitioning of, being very involved in every little detail and then kind of backing off. This may go even more into the middle school years as opposed to high school specifically. But what does that actually look like, trying to encourage that independence? Um, because that's where I am. I'm starting,
Yeah.
I've got a fifth grader. Here's your list. I'm just going to give you 30 minutes. When I come back, I want this to be done. We're working on that. Okay.
Yes.
Um, and it is kind of a transition period from me just holding your hand through every little tick box to I expect you to come back and not just have it done, but do it well and right. So any advice for making that transition? And I'm assuming it's very gradual too, and different subjects will look different, but maybe you have some insight there.
Sure. I think it's going to be a little trial and error, right? And I think it's going to change with each child. So I think you're just
Mhm,
going to have to really lean into who they are and how they learn. For Griffin, the second I realized checklists were like that was his way. And so as soon as I put his day on a checklist, he was golden and he ran with it. But the girls, not so much. I could make a checklist until, you know, every day of my life, and they would just leave it laying on the table. And so you just have to realize where each child is. So I think definitely baby steps. So pick the subject that they are the most independent already in, and you know what
mhm,
those are. Like some of your kids need very little help in math, or some of them can read a book in a day, or so pick something that they're already super successful at and start there, because that's going to help them feel empowered to take the independence on the things that they're not so confident
mhm.
in. So if you start with the subjects that they're already confident in, and then you just really praise that, and man, look, you did this whole week of math, and we didn't even check in until Friday. Just really work on giving them that independence, but also praising them when they do a great job with that, and then just work on, it may just be one subject at a time. It may be one day at a time. Like on Tuesdays, you're going to work on your own, and here's your list for Tuesday. And then
Mhm.
maybe it's, and then as a mom, I think we have to really be careful to not micromanage throughout that day, right? Give them a chance to not not make it, and maybe have a check-in, I don't know, at a certain time of the day. And if they're not done,
Mhm.
maybe that day looks a little different than you had planned because you're teaching them that independence. So maybe that day looks like they're still sitting there at 4 o'clock working on their, when they could have had it done by noon. But
Yeah.
I think that's all part of the learning and teaching process.
You mentioned having a check-in, and I was actually reading a book, and another high school homeschool mom was talking about this check-in. Is that something that usually you kind of did on a weekly basis at the end of the week? Let's recap and, how did it go? What did that look like for you?
We did it a couple of times. So we are part of a classical conversations community, and
Okay.
so for us, our day start is on Thursdays, and so typically, so our week kind of starts on Friday. So Friday, I would check in with them, and they just make, now at this age, they make their own list of what they're going to do on
Mhm.
Friday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and so that would look like on Friday, seeing what their school list was going to look like, and then another check in on Tuesday or Wednesday. If they have a paper, we read the paper. If they have some memorized lines, I go over those with them. Whatever they have due that week, we go over those things. But as far as when they were middle school, lower high school, it definitely was a check in at the beginning to make sure that they laid out a good plan, or if they needed help laying out a good plan.
Mhm.
Um, Typically, they definitely would need a little bit of help in those early years laying out, a
Yeah.
plan that was feasible. Otherwise, I don't know if you have, I had probably one child who would, I can get it all done on Wednesday. I don't have to do school. I'll just do it all on Wednesday.
And then
So,
Wednesday comes.
yes. And so I just think you have to make sure it's a feasible plan. So yeah,
Yeah.
there's a check-in for sure at the beginning, wherever that first day is, and then a check-in. Um, I would say for sure, early high school would be a check-in, beginning, middle, and end for sure.
Mhm. Yeah. Great. I love that. This is off script, but what was your favorite subject to teach in the high school years?
You know, it would have to be the reading, the exposition for
Good.
us.
I
Great.
fully expected that would be your
Yeah.
answer.
I mean,
You did not
grammar is
disappoint.
always grammar too. I love the grammar portion of it as well. But we've just read some super fun books, and it's just been really fun
Mhm.
to read those together. And that's one thing we did as a family is read alouds for lots of years.
Yeah.
We haven't done that in the last couple of years. Not that you can't as a high schooler, it just isn't
Mhm.
something that we've kept up with. But um, we still read and we still talk about it, and they're reading the book, and then we'll have a good discussion about it after they read it. And yeah, so definitely the exposition strand for sure.
Yeah. Was there any book or couple books that stand out in particular that you were just like, "Oh, our family fell in love with this one?"
Oh, Number of the
Mhm.
Stars and Johnny Tremaine have probably been two of our favorites. Um, but there've been several. Yeah, I would say those two have been, although I have a Pride and Prejudice fan, so we read that and Jane Eyre. So those were her favorites, but not Griffin's favorites, so we went
Yes.
back and forth on those. But yeah, those were favorites too.
Oh, that's so neat. That's what I'm really excited for. And I love reading to my kids now in this season. It's fun, but I'm looking forward to those conversations and just all of that. That is so exciting.
And I saw you're doing
Well,
Shakespeare too. Mackenzie's into Shakespeare this year.
yes.
And so she has read, I think they read 5 Shakespeare plays. And so she loved Shakespeare this year. And so that's fun that you're doing that too.
I was so surprised. I would never have thought Shakespeare for little ones. But I got some different resources. They're like, it can be done. We dove in and oh, they had so much fun. I mean, still,
That's so
my
fun.
5-year-old, to hear my 5-year-old quoting Shakespeare, that just makes this homeschool mom very happy.
Yes, that's so fun.
Oh, neat. Well, we'll transition here just at the little bit at the end. You giving more kind of some insight and wisdom to moms who are in my season with little ones. So for moms with younger children, what would you say maybe they should focus on now to help prepare for those teen years? And you've given some really great things with conversation and just investing in those relationships, but anything that stands out that you're like, man, I wish maybe knowing what I know now, I would have done this a little sooner.
Yeah, so I'm going to flip the script on that one a little bit just because when I started this journey, um, I think I saw the really big opportunity for a lot of regret. And
Mm,
so I just really felt like the Lord spoke into that. And I really feel like I didn't want to live there. So I didn't want to make room for having regrets because, as homeschool moms, it's a lot on our shoulders. And
yeah.
yes, at the end of the journey, we can feel like we didn't do enough or we should have done this or we could have gone this other way. Or no doubt in the next 5 years, there's going to be something new that comes out. And I'm going to be like, oh, if that had been here when my kids were homeschooling, that would have been amazing. So I want to flip that script a little bit and just talk about the things that I'm really glad that we did do and really
Yeah,
glad that we
sure.
were able to get done, if that's okay. So I will say for the little years, just enjoy them while they're little. It goes I know you've heard it a million times, but it goes so quickly. I mean, obviously there's teach them to read, teach them handwriting, teach them their math skills, but then just take a lot of time to just play and develop those relationships and just have those conversations and just not focusing on the high school years until you need to because they'll come and you'll be ready for them and that will be fine. But I think just really, I do think it's important to know your why, like why you homeschool.
Mhm.
And that doesn't have to be a deep philosophical reason why. It can just be the fact that you want to spend more time with your kids and you're not ready to give them up for their days and that's okay. But I think also knowing that at the end of the day you are equipped to homeschool through high school. It doesn't matter if you never finished college. It doesn't matter where you are in your education journey, you're equipped to be their mom and that's enough to homeschool them through high school. And um, for us that looked like my kids will all graduate with chemistry on their high school transcript, but I haven't personally taught the chemistry class at all. So there's so many opportunities for, outsourcing that as far as just getting help with those online
Mhm.
lessons or things that you might not feel equipped to do. So I think in the younger years, I would just try to release that pressure of feeling like there's no way I can do high school because it's just
Yeah.
another year. If you just take it one day at a time, 1 year at a time, you'll grow with your kids and then you'll be ready for that. But one thing I am glad that we did morning basket. I loved our morning basket time together. We read um we read together. The read alouds were great. um I also am thankful that I never tried to fit them all into the same mold. Your kids will
Mm,
all be different. So I think sometimes as homeschool moms, once we purchase that kindergarten math curriculum, that's what we figure all of our kindergartners are going to use. And
yeah.
then, so I think just knowing that it's okay for a child to learn differently or think differently or need a different style of that particular curriculum, I think
Mm,
that's important to look at too as they're little. And um, yeah, so maybe some of those things.
yeah. Well, I'm glad that you mentioned and brought up the conversation of I'm not equipped to do high school. Because I think that's a very daunting one for people. I know some people have asked me about homeschooling and just like, oh, I could never. And then they ask what my background is. And once I say, oh, it was in education, oh, okay, well, that makes
Oh,
sense.
that's
You're
why.
qualified.
Yep.
And, funny, I'm thankful for my education. I'm thankful
Mhm,
for what I learned. Um, I have learned vastly more just being a homeschool mom and figuring it
mhm.
out as I go
Yeah,
and just trying to stay one step ahead. And
that's right.
you're right, there are so many different things out there nowadays that can help, especially in those high school years. And I am thankful that my areas of strength are not my husband's and vice versa. Even already,
Yes.
I said my daughter's in fifth grade, and there's sometimes maybe it's pregnancy brain, but she asked me about her math the other day, and I was like, honey, it's just going to require too much of my brain to try to wrap around that. I feel
That's
like I'm
right.
looking at Chinese. So wait till daddy gets home and he can answer your
What's
question.
that stuff?
Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, there's just so many resources and things out there. And you talked about that just 1 year at a time. And just remembering that God called you to be mom and no
Yep.
one can do it as well as you can.
I think I often say that I redeemed my education each year that I homeschool, that I'm redeeming my own education. And I think, that doesn't mean that I haven't dug into a chemistry assignment and
Yeah.
tried to find those answers. And, but a lot of that is just, I don't have to know the chemistry. It's just looking for,
Mhm.
the words and
Yeah.
the things. So you will have to, I still dig in with my high schoolers and I still hear their papers and, but it's just a little different than, I'm going to lose it again. You just don't have to. There's so many, you're right, so many resources. We delve into the dual enrollment world. I don't know,
Mhm.
that is also something that you have in the high school, so Griffin loved the dual enrollment. And so we took
Mhm.
full advantage of that in Tennessee. You get 5 of those classes for free, which is nice in Tennessee, but I don't know what all the other states do for that. But my girls aren't loving that quite as much. We do one class. We do a couple of classes of that with our kids, just because as we equip them and as we launch them, if they do choose the college path, I'd rather their first class sitting under a different professor to not be after
Yeah.
after they launch. And so
Yes.
we have just done one that's worked for us in high school, just to soft launch, kind of is how we call it.
Mhm.
And so in Tennessee, you can do that as a junior or senior, and that's helped too. And so,
Yeah.
but those can be your math credits, those can be your science, those can be credits that you're not as confident in. So there's so many
Mhm.
resources. I just would love for moms to feel like, because we can't do it all, but
Yeah.
there are so many things out there that we can just pull together to make it work,
Mm.
and it's worth it for sure.
Yeah. Well, Jamie, this has been such an awesome conversation. Any final things closing out? Words of advice, wisdom, encouragement? You're wrapping up this season of homeschooling. When you told me you had 11th to 12th grader, I thought, "Oh my goodness, one day that's going to be me." And so much of your life as a homeschool mom is poured into homeschooling. It'll be funny to be at a point where that's winding down and transitioning into a whole nother season of life.
It is a whole nother season, and it's so amazing. But yes, I would love to just encourage all the moms and dads out there who are homeschooling that each year, something that I love to do is multiply the hours that I've gotten to spend with my kids. And so back on the time. So after this year, I'm over 14,000 hours with my kids that I wouldn't have gotten otherwise. And that's just such a gift. And they're not all beautiful hours. They're not all peaceful hours. They're they're not, but they are hours. And
Yes.
so you've gotten to walk through the ugly, you've gotten to walk through the hard, you've also gotten to walk through the great with your kids. And
Mhm.
those are forming relationships that will carry on through their adult life. And I'm prayerful that my kids and I have formed relationships that we will continue on to be friends, the shift of to mother, to friend and mentor. And so I think that um, every child's different. Every child needs something, so just lean into that and don't be scared of the hard. And um, I just think it's just such a gift to spend that time with your kids, and the conversations and the deep thoughts and emotions that you get to hear from your kids are such a gift. And so I just
Mhm.
encourage all the moms to just feel, don't be afraid of the hard, don't be afraid to lean in, and it does just get sweeter.
Yeah. I love that. There is a pastor here that was talking to Simeon and I kind of along those lines of just investing in your kids. And he said, we always want that quality time with them. But he said, you actually don't get the quality unless you spend the quantity, because it's
Yeah.
in spending the quantity that usually the quality pops up when you least expect it, like midnight. We aren't quite there yet, thank goodness,
Yes.
because I'm still in the season of having babies.
Yes.
um, but I love that. I love that homeschooling does afford so much time and opportunity. And you're there. You're there for the moments when they need you. So this has
Yes.
been such a treat for me. Thank you so much for joining on the podcast. I know it's going to be just a blessing and encouragement to those who listen. So it's been great to have you on.
Thank you for having me. I've really enjoyed it.